Do you want to come with me? A millionaire CEO helped a shivering nurse at the bus stop and took her home. Before the story begins, tell me here in the comments, where are you watching from? I love knowing how far these stories are reaching, and if you enjoy love stories filled with emotion, twists and heartwarming endings, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That way, you help me keep bringing true and intense stories, and you become part of growing this space made for those who believe in real love. The wind cut through her skin like a razor on that rainy night in Seattle. The sky was low, squeezed between dark clouds, and the constant drizzle ran through the streets like the city's silent sob. It was nearly 11 o'clock at night. At the bus stop on 5th Avenue, in front of the Central Public Hospital, a woman stood with her arms crossed tightly against her body, as if that could stop her from freezing inside and out. Alicia Montgomery, 28 years old, fair-skinned, with long, straight red hair plastered to her face by the humidity, was trembling. She wore a simple, dark, wine-colored dress, a worn grey coat, and closed shoes that were already soaked. Her posture spoke of someone enduring fatigue with dignity. Her intense, amber-green eyes, full of untold stories, watched the passing cars. None of them stopped. She had just finished another 14-hour shift in the emergency room. She'd lost a 6-year-old boy that night, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the sound of the child's heart flatlining on the monitor. She was there because her old car had broken down 2 days earlier, and she couldn't afford the repair. She didn't want to ask for help. She never did. And now, not even the bus was coming. She was alone, cold, exhausted. Across the street, a black luxury car approached slowly. A Cadillac Escalade, tinted windows, chrome wheels, the engine almost silent. It stopped in front of the bus stop. The passenger window rolled down slowly. Alicia hesitated, turned her head slowly. A man was in the driver's seat. He was tall, with strong, elegant features. White skin, slightly wavy light brown hair, neatly trimmed beard. He wore an impeccable black suit, a dark tie, and a long coat that matched the contained power in his gestures. His eyes, a deep green, observed her as if analyzing something rare, but without disdain. There was curiosity, respect, and perhaps something more. "Do you want to come with me?" The voice was firm, low, without urgency. It wasn't a pickup line, it wasn't pity. It was as if he somehow knew, by some inexplicable reason, that she needed to get out of there. Alicia didn't respond right away. Her heart raced, but not with fear. It was as if something inside her said that this moment was a crossing point between past, present, and destiny. She looked around. There was nobody. Just her, the cold, and that stranger with intense eyes. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to keep her poise, though trembling. Someone who's frozen on the inside and learned to recognize when someone else is about to do the same. She swallowed hard. Her body said yes. Her mind screamed no, but her eyes, those green, steady, sad eyes, didn't lie. He wasn't trying to rescue her. He was trying not to lose someone. Again. Alicia stepped closer, felt the warm air coming. From the car, she hesitated once more, looked at him. "If you hurt me, you'll regret it," she said coldly. "If I hurt you, I regret it now." She got in. The seat was heated. The silence between them was thick, almost palpable. And as the car glided through the wet streets of Seattle, Alicia realized she didn't know his name, and he hadn't asked hers. There was no conversation, just silence and breathing, and a strange feeling, as if something had begun right then, in the middle of the rain, between two souls cracked by life. When he stopped in front of a modern glass and concrete building, he got out of the car and opened the door for her, held out his hand. She refused. Walked alone to the entrance, still trembling. In the elevator, he finally spoke. "My name is Ezekiel, and you seem like someone who wasn't made to wait in the cold." She looked at him with tired but firm eyes. "And you seem like someone used to buying everything, but you won't buy me." He smiled for the first time, a light but real smile, and said nothing more. That night, Alicia slept in a guest room with clean sheets, a warm body, and a soul still at war. Ezekiel, in the room next door, didn't sleep a wink. There was something about that woman, something he couldn't decode, but he knew that, for the first time in a long time, he wanted her, not to possess her, to understand her. The next morning, the city of Seattle awoke gray, damp, and hurried as always. But in Ezequiel Lancaster's glass-walled apartment, time seemed suspended. Alicia Montgomery woke up slowly, wrapped in white sheets that still held the soft scent of lavender. She got up slowly, her body less tense, but her mind restless. She looked around. The room was minimalist, luxurious, silent, with an impressive view of the fog-covered city. Everything there was perfect, but strange. She felt out of place in that setting. She was wearing a wide cotton t-shirt and sweatpants rolled at the waist. Men's clothes. They must be his. She sat on the edge of the bed and ran her hands through her red hair, still damp from the previous night. She remembered the exact moment she got into that black car, driven by cold, exhaustion, and something she couldn't explain. The apartment was silent, until she heard light, rhythmic footsteps. Ezekiel appeared at the door with a cup of coffee in his hands, wearing his black suit again, now without the tie, his shirt collar unbuttoned, face clean-shaven, gaze as enigmatic as the night before. "I brought this for you," he said, handing her the cup. "It's sugar-free. I remembered what you said at the hospital." She took the coffee without responding immediately, then murmured, "Thank you, and for last night too." He just nodded. The silence between them was dense but not uncomfortable. It was as if they both understood that each carried things that weren't ready to be spoken yet. Alicia stood up, keeping her eyes on him. "Why did you stop at that bus stop?" she asked bluntly. Ezekiel stayed silent for a moment. Then he answered, "I don't know, maybe because I recognized what I saw in you." "And what did you see?" He took a deep breath, walked to the window, looking at the buildings shrouded in fog, someone trying not to fall apart, and failing. She felt her chest tighten. That hit her in a way no words had in years. She stepped closer slowly. "You looked at me for a few seconds and thought you knew what I was feeling?" "No," he said, turning to face her. "I thought I knew what you were hiding." Alicia's eyes glistened, not with anger, but something between surprise and pain. He wasn't wrong. She was failing to hold herself together, even if she didn't admit it. She looked away and walked to the kitchen, trying to change the subject. "I should go. I have to work." "You still have a fever," he said seriously. "I spent the whole time deciding whether to take you to a hospital or let you sleep." Alicia looked at him suspiciously. "Are you always like this? Taking care of strangers you find on the street?" "No," he replied without hesitation. "Only the ones who ask for nothing, even when they're about to collapse." She stayed quiet for a few seconds. That touched her, but she didn't want to give in. "You don't know me, Ezekiel, and you don't know me," she gave a slight smirk, "which is exactly why I should go." Ezekiel walked over and for a moment stood less than a foot away. His eyes didn't intimidate her. They were intense, yes, but there was pain in them, a quiet, well-hidden pain. And real. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I just don't want you to leave like nothing happened." "And what happened?" she asked, voice softer. He hesitated for a second, then said, "You froze, and I couldn't let it happen." Alicia lowered her eyes. She wanted to go, needed to go, but couldn't take the first step. There, in that sleek kitchen of brushed steel and white marble, two people who didn't know each other but carried similar scars stared at each other like they were trying to understand themselves through the other. She grabbed her backpack, the same old worn one, and walked to the door. "Thank you and truly, but I don't want you thinking you need to save me," Ezequiel replied in a low, firm voice. "I don't save anyone, Alicia. I just couldn't find a reason to leave you there." She looked at him one last time before leaving and smiled, a small, layered smile, then disappeared down the hallway. Ezequiel stood in the living room for a while, staring at the closed door. For the first time in a long time. He missed someone he didn't even really know yet, but who somehow seemed capable of stirring things. He'd kept locked away for years, and there, in the silence of his apartment, Ezequiel knew that story was just beginning. The morning was cold, but the sun was finally peeking through the grey clouds over Seattle. Alicia walked briskly down the damp sidewalk, heading back to the hospital where she worked. She had slept at a nurse friend's house after leaving Ezequiel's apartment. She couldn't get that encounter out of her mind. His look, the silence, and the way he seemed to see her, even without saying much. She grabbed a cheap coffee on the corner and entered through the hospital's side door. Almost immediately the whispers began. Some looks were curious, others judging. A closer co-worker pulled her aside. "You went out with him, didn't you?" "The guy with the black car." Alicia frowned. "What are you talking about?" The friend showed her a phone, a headline from a local gossip site. "Ezequiel Lancaster seen with mystery woman leaving public hospital. Who is the redhead who caught the eye of Seattle's most private billionaire?" Alicia's blood ran cold. His name, his face, and hers, right there. She had no idea who he was until that moment. She sat in the locker room, phone trembling in her hands, typed his name in a search engine, and the headlines jumped out. Founder and CEO of Lancaster Biotech, self-made billionaire, considered one of the most influential men in the country's medical sector. An empire built in the last 5 years. She remembered his calm, his calculated silence. And now it all made sense. The car, the building, the eyes that carried the weight of someone who had seen too much and lost a lot. That same afternoon, after her shift, Alicia saw the same black car parked discreetly across the street. Ezequiel was leaning against the door, dark suit, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "Why are you here?" she asked, crossing her arms. "To apologize." She raised an eyebrow. "For what? For not telling me who you were? For letting a camera catch my face and now I'm all over the internet like I'm some trophy of yours?" "That's not it," he said, approaching slowly. "I don't usually explain myself, Alicia. But with you, it's different." "Why?" She shot back, hurt. "Because I didn't accept your expensive coffee, or because I slept in your house without begging for help." Ezequiel looked down for a moment. "Because you were the first person in years to look at me without expecting anything in return. And because I realized not knowing your name affected me more than it should have." She took a deep breath. She was tired of the exposure, the judgment, the chasm between his world and hers. "You don't have to pay for humanity, Ezequiel." He looked up, surprised at the firmness in her voice. "You took me to your house because you saw someone in pain. That doesn't give you the right to fix my life or to invade it." For a moment, everything was silent. The sound of cars in the distance, the cold breeze, the wet leaves on the ground, and his eyes, which now seemed a little less impenetrable. "I don't want to invade anything, Alicia. I just wanted to keep seeing you." She looked away, folded her arms tightly around her body. "You live in a world where people are numbers and strategies. I live in one where people die because they don't have insurance." He took another step closer. "Maybe that's exactly why we need to talk." She looked at him with a mix of anger, compassion, and fear. And for a second, she saw honesty, maybe even regret. "Don't follow me anymore, Ezequiel. I'm real. And your life seems like anything but that." She turned and walked away, breathing fast. But he didn't stop her. He just stayed there, watching her leave, more determined than ever. Then Ezequiel leaned back against the car, closed his eyes for a moment, and murmured, "Real. That's exactly why." But the sentence never finished, and at that moment he knew he wasn't dealing with another negotiation. He was facing someone who couldn't be bought, only won over, and that scared him more than any financial report ever had. Winter was relentless in Seattle. The city breathed humidity, and the days felt swallowed by a fog that wouldn't go away. Alicia Montgomery kept her hospital routine with the same discipline as always: long shifts, accumulated exhaustion, and an inner silence she had grown used to carrying like a second skin. But something had changed. Small things, subtle, like the hot coffee that started showing up every morning on the cafeteria table, her name handwritten on the cup. Or the new blue wool coat left strategically in the break room with a tag she recognized. Far too expensive for any nurse to afford. She pretended not to see it, told herself she didn't need it, that he, Ezequiel Lancaster, was just trying to ease his own guilt, or playing some form of control disguised as care. But he never approached her. Never insisted, didn't send messages. He just appeared, sometimes standing at the hospital entrance as if he only wanted to confirm she was alive. Other times, sitting in the back seat of the car, watching from a distance, in silence. And it was the silence, precisely, that began to speak the loudest. That Wednesday, Alicia finished an 18-hour shift. She lost a young patient because there were no ICU beds available. Had to break the news to the family, heard the mother cry in the hallway, and then the father's muffled scream. She didn't cry, but inside, something in her collapsed. When she walked out of the locker room, exhausted and eyes burning with sleep, she saw the coffee cup waiting for her on the counter. She picked it up without thinking. It was warm. The aroma was hers. Slightly bitter, no sugar, with oat milk. She sighed, sat on the wooden bench by the window and closed her eyes. Minutes later, a shadow approached. She opened her eyes slowly. Ezequiel was there, hands in the pockets of his dark coat. His light brown hair was a little messy from the drizzle, but he looked less perfect, more human. "Can I?" he asked. Motioning to the bench beside her, she hesitated, then nodded. They sat side by side in silence. The distant sound of ambulances filled the seconds. The coffee steam rose slowly, as if it too was struggling to breathe. "You look tired," he said. She gave a half smile, ironic. "You say that like it's something new, something new." He looked at her, focused. Was today a bad day? She didn't respond right away. Stared into the bottom of her cup, then whispered, "Every day is bad. Only the faces change." Ezequiel lowered his gaze. He didn't try to correct her, didn't offer solutions. And that strangely made Alicia relax for the first time. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, turning to him. "The coffees, the coats, this silent presence." "Because I haven't been able to forget you since that night," he answered, honestly. "And because I didn't want you to think that night was some kind of power play." She looked at him, trying to read something behind those deep green eyes. "I thought it was." "I know." She took a deep breath, then said in a lower tone, "I'm not the kind of woman who needs saving, Ezequiel. And I'm not the kind of man who wants to save anyone. I just don't want to leave." For a moment they sat there, staring at each other. She, with a tired but softer look. He with the same silent intensity as always, only now cracked by a vulnerability he was trying to hide, but could no longer mask. "I thought about blocking you out of my life," she admitted. "But every time I tried, I'd picture you, sitting in that car, and I'd remember what it felt like to be seen without judgment, and I remembered what it was like to be looked at by someone who wasn't afraid of me." Alicia looked toward the window. The rain had started again. She took another sip of her coffee and stood up. "I don't know what you're expecting from me, Ezequiel, but I don't have much to give." He stood up too, took a step forward, but didn't try to touch her. "Maybe the little you have is more than everything I've managed to gather." She looked at him, serious, wanted to hate him, wanted not to believe him, but couldn't. "See you tomorrow?" he asked, like someone asking for permission to keep trying. She hesitated, and then, for the first time, truly smiled. "See you tomorrow," and walked away. He watched her walk down the hallway until she disappeared through the door. And in that moment, Ezequiel Lancaster realized he was closer to losing control than he ever thought possible. And strangely, that didn't scare him. The next night, Alicia was finishing another shift when she saw him again. Ezequiel was sitting outside the hospital, next to one of the few bare trees still standing in the winter. He wasn't wearing a suit this time. He had on a dark sweater, no tie, and looked simpler, more real. She approached slowly, her hands still cold. He didn't turn right away, just stared at the overcast sky, as if looking for an answer that never came. "You look different today," she said, sitting beside him on the worn wooden bench. "Today's February 28th, he replied in a low voice. 3 years since my sister died." Alicia stayed quiet. She didn't know he had a sister. In truth, she knew almost nothing about him. But at that moment, she felt the air shift between them, as if something long waiting to be said was finally ready. "She was a nurse," he continued, "worked at a public hospital in New Jersey. Second wave of the pandemic, no equipment, 20-hour shifts. She got sick and refused to leave the ward. Said the patients needed her more than she needed herself." Ezequiel rubbed his face, breathing deeply. His eyes, usually so controlled, were now red. "When I found out she was intubated, it was too late. And even with all the resources, all the contacts, everything I had, I couldn't save her." Alicia watched him without saying a word. But inside, she felt a weight tighten in her chest with every sentence. It was like seeing the man behind the empire. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, but the brother. "She used to tell me the system was sick," he went on. "That the real virus was inequality. I promised that if something happened to her, I'd do things differently, that I'd change something." He turned to Alicia, his eyes now locked on hers. "I built everything trying to make up for something I'll never get back." Alicia felt a lump in her throat. Her body reacted before her mind. Slowly, without saying a word, she reached out and took his hand. It was the first time they truly touched. His skin was cold, but the gesture was warm, genuine. Ezequiel's eyes softened. She didn't cry, neither did he, but there was something stronger than tears in that moment. Silent understanding. "Her name was Clara," he said, almost in a whisper. "And she'd be proud of you," Alicia replied, gently squeezing his. And Ezequiel smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You don't know half the things I've done. Not everything was pretty, Alicia. I'm not here for what you got right. I'm here because, despite everything, you still feel. And that isn't nothing." They stayed silent, their hands intertwined. The cold felt less harsh, and the defenses Alicia had built around herself began to crack little by little. His truth wasn't perfect, but it was real. And she knew, there on that hospital bench, that something had changed between them. It wasn't just care or attraction. It was connection. And while that was scary, it also gave a strange feeling of shelter. Deep down, they both knew. When the walls start to fall, what comes next can either save or destroy. That night, the rain fell soft and steady, as if the sky were weeping in silence. Alicia's shift felt endless. She could barely feel her own feet wet and sore. But what really weighed her down was what she carried in her chest, a 16-year-old boy, a victim of an overdose. He arrived with his eyes rolled back and skin grey. They tried to revive him for more than 20 minutes. In the end, she had to tell his mother, a woman, her diner apron still stained with grease, that her son wasn't coming back. She heard the scream, the off-key tone of raw pain. It tore through Alicia like shattered glass. When the clock struck almost 1 in the morning, she walked out the back of the hospital without changing out of her uniform. Her navy blue pants were stained with blood, and the heavy coat couldn't hide the weariness in her shoulders. She made her way to the parking lot, struggling to breathe, but the air felt heavy in her lungs. That's when she saw him. Ezequiel was there, leaning quietly against his black car. He wore a dark coat, his light brown hair damp from the drizzle, his eyes fixed on her as if he felt before he saw. He said nothing. He simply opened his arms. Slowly, Alicia stopped. Her eyes were brimming, but she still fought the urge to break down. She was so used to being strong. But in that moment, strength was the last thing she had left. She took 2 steps, then 3, and when she finally rested her face against his chest, his arms closed around her with firmness and care. There, between the distant hum of cars and the smell of wet concrete, Alicia cried. She cried in a way she hadn't since her mother's death. She cried with her whole body, her shoulders, her soul. Ezequiel didn't speak. He held her, with the calm of someone who understands that silence is sometimes the only language possible. After minutes, or perhaps an eternity, Alicia lifted her face. Her eyes were red, her nose cold, her red hair stuck to her skin. He looked at her, and there was pain in his eyes too, but it felt shared, recognized. She didn't think, he didn't either. The kiss came like someone breathing after being submerged for a long time. It wasn't planned, nor rehearsed. It was instinct stronger than any fear. Their lips met with gentle urgency. Her hands went to the back of his neck. His hands touched her face, as if holding something too fragile for the world. There was no carnal desire in that moment. There was need. There was surrender. There was what remains when everything else fails. Someone who holds you without demanding, without judging, without fleeing. When the kiss ended, Alicia's eyes were closed. Her face pressed to his, her breath uneven. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. "I couldn't not come," he replied. Alicia rested her forehead on his chest and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what she was feeling. Ezequiel enveloped her again in silence, as if to say the world could wait a little longer. There, in the empty parking lot, among the rain, the cold, and their invisible scars, something new was born. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a commitment. It was just truth, for the first time, whole. The following week, what began as silence between 2 hurting hearts became noise in the wrong hands. Ezequiel had cancelled meetings, changed his routine, handed decisions to his directors, while allowing himself something he hadn't done in years, feel. He and Alicia started seeing each other more often, away from the limelight, sharing late-night coffees and conversations cut short by her exhaustion after shifts. They still had no labels, promises, or definitions. But what existed between them was sincere until everything collapsed. On a grey Friday morning, Alicia arrived at the hospital and noticed that people were looking at her differently. It wasn't just curiosity. It was judgment, disguised laughter, poison. She entered the locker room and found her colleague with her phone open to an article on the Seattle View. Caught. Billionaire Ezequiel Lancaster kissing a nurse in a public parking lot. New romance or marketing strategy to save Lancaster Biotech's image after internal complaints. Below the headline were photos of them together. The embrace, the kiss. Alicia's exhausted expression pressed against his chest. Her stomach churned. Her heart raced, but not from love, from shame. Her hands trembled. She ran outside, the hospital noise muffled by the pounding of her own blood in her ears. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages, calls, notifications. She didn't want to look, didn't need to. That afternoon she was called into hospital administration. The conversation was brief, cold, procedural. Given the publicity, we need to place you on temporary leave until the situation stabilizes. It's best for the institution and for you. Alicia left with her soul cut. No recognition of her years of devotion, no respect for her story, just a verdict. You became a headline, and headlines stain. She went straight to Ezequiel's office. Walked in without warning. His secretary tried to stop her, but her look was enough. Ezequiel stood beside his desk on a phone call. When he saw her, he immediately ended the call. Alicia. She was pale. Her eyes burned. What remained of her dignity rested in her straight shoulders and firm voice. You knew this could happen, she said. I swear I didn't. I didn't authorize it. Those images were leaked without my knowledge. But someone inside your company had access to them. And do you know why? Because you left the door open. You exposed me, Ezequiel. You put me in a world I never asked to be in. I'm trying to fix it. Fix it, she interrupted, laughing in pain. I lost my job, my peace, my identity, and all of this because I trusted you. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, because you said you saw me, but used my pain as a headline. Ezequiel stepped forward, his eyes pleading. Alicia, hear me. She took a step back. Tears glittered in her eyes, refusing to fall. I listened to you from the start. I listened to your pain, your silences, your guilt, but now you're going to listen to mine. She took a deep breath, trying to hold back crying. I wasn't just exposed, I was reduced. The poor nurse who charmed the billionaire, a romance turned headline. I became a footnote in your story. Ezequiel still said nothing. For the first time he had no answers, no excuses. Alicia picked up the spare car key he'd left for her. She placed it firmly on the glass desk. You lost. Me, Ezequiel, not because you made a mistake, because you stayed silent when you most needed to speak. She turned and walked away, leaving behind not only the man she was beginning to love, but the part of herself that had believed it could be possible to live between two such different worlds. Ezequiel stood frozen. The sound of the door closing echoed like a warning. This time, he felt what it meant to lose something real. Tacoma was smaller, quieter, and in the cold months felt gray even inside. Alicia carried two simple suitcases, her red hair tied in a hurried bun, and the tired look of someone still fighting to hold herself upright, even as her world crumbled inside. Her aunt's house was in an old neighborhood where yards had wooden fences and clotheslines were still in frequent use. Mrs. Edith, a firm-voiced lady with hands worn by years, opened the door and greeted her with a dry hug, but filled with silent tenderness. You didn't have to go through that, she said, while closing the door. But sometimes we have to lose to understand what we really want to keep. Alicia didn't reply. She just nodded and took a deep breath. She didn't want advice. She wanted peace. In the days that followed, she avoided the news, logged off social media, and swapped her nurse uniform for simple t-shirts and cotton pants. She began teaching first aid classes in an underprivileged community in South Tacoma. It was a cramped room in a community center that smelled of weak coffee and chalk. But there, she felt useful, seen, free from the exposure that hurt her more. Then she admitted, even with everything she had lived through, she refused to feed hatred. There was hurt, yes, disappointment too, but love was still there, hidden among memories and silences that persisted when the house fell still at night. Meanwhile, across the state, Ezequiel Lancaster disappeared from the media. No one knew exactly what happened. He sold a significant portion of his company's shares, stepped away from the board, and stopped attending public events. He vanished from newspapers, from galas, from the stock exchange. But Alicia knew, she felt it. He was looking for her. He tried to contact her several times. He sent letters, handwritten, no messages, letters. He sent books with subtle dedications. One of them had only one marked sentence. The silence between two people who love each other can be louder than the cry of an entire world. She read it and cried, but she didn't respond. On a rainy morning, he showed up at the community center. He waited outside under the zinc awning while children and mothers left their classes. Alicia saw him through the window. The same dark coat, the same look, but now different. He looked thinner, more contained. He wore the expression of someone who had not come to demand anything, just to be. She walked out the side door. She didn't have the courage to face him. The next day he came again, and the next. For a whole week he sat on the bench in the plaza in front of the center, without saying a word, without approaching. He just waited. On the 8th day, she sent a message. Through a volunteer, tell him I still love him, but that I can't trust him. Hearing that, Ezequiel lowered his eyes. He accepted it. He stood up slowly, put his hands in his coat pockets and left, without protest, without drama, because now he understood. It wasn't enough to feel. He needed to prove it, and rebuild, brick by brick, from the outside. Alicia watched him through the window, and as much as her heart begged to run to him, her mind whispered it was too soon, but inside her a small, stubborn flame remained lit. Time passed as it does for those who suffer in silence, slow inside, fast outside. 3 months had slipped. Since the last time Alicia saw Ezequiel sitting in the plaza, waiting in silence. Since then, he hadn't returned. Her life continued in Tacoma, now more stable. The first aid classes had become a small community project, growing day by day. Children learned to save lives with simple techniques. Young volunteers were inspired by her strength, but behind the smiles she gave generously, Alicia harbored a hidden longing, a quiet pain that refused to heal. On that Saturday morning, she had just served Aunt Edith her coffee when she heard the television from the living room. "There's a live press conference on something important," her aunt called, holding the remote. "I think it's that man, the one from the news. What's his name again?" Alicia froze. Her heart raced. "Ezequiel Lancaster," she whispered. She ran into the living room. The cameras were broadcasting live from a modern auditorium in Seattle, filled with journalists and shareholders. It was a Lancaster biotech event, weeks in the making. Many expected announcements of new investments, others answers about Ezequiel's sudden absence. But what happened? No one saw coming. He walked on stage calmly. He wore a dark suit, the same impeccable cut as always, but without the shine of the man who once graced magazine covers. His face was serious, not arrogant, just genuine. When he stepped up to the microphone, the lights adjusted and flashes stopped. He looked directly at the audience and into the cameras. "I know many of you expected numbers, strategies, charts, but today, that's not what I came to talk about." People exchanged confused looks. "For years, I built this company with one purpose, to try to compensate for the guilt of not having saved my sister. And along the way, I lost myself." He paused. The auditorium was heavy with silence. Months ago, I met someone. A woman who asked me for nothing but gave me everything I needed. Truth. At Aunt Edith's house, Alicia stood frozen, staring at the TV. She saved me, not with medicine, but with humanity, with dignity, with a look that cut through me when no one else could see me. Ezequiel's voice wavered for a moment. He inhaled deeply. "And I ruined it all, with my silence. with my cowardice, with my failure to protect her when she needed me most. The cameras zoomed in on his eyes. For the first time, the entire country saw the once cold, arrogant, closed billionaire broken. The love I feel for Alicia Montgomery is the one thing I cannot buy, and the only thing worth fighting for. The auditorium went silent. No journalist dared raise a hand. Ezequiel simply nodded and walked off stage, answering no questions, not smiling, but with his heart exposed to the entire nation. Alicia was still standing, tears in her eyes, breathing slowly. Her aunt approached with the remote. "Want me to turn it off?" "No," Alicia replied, voice trembling. "I want to hear the whole thing." That night, the video spread across social media, crossed borders, became headlines. People everywhere commented. Some called it a marketing ploy, others a redemption, but for Alicia it was something else. She cried calm tears, not of anger, of recognition. He had spoken. Late, yes, but with truth. Still, she didn't seek him out, didn't answer, because deep down, she wanted to know if he had changed out of love for her, or love for himself. And in the silence of that waiting, a new story began to be written. Autumn had turned Tacoma into a mosaic of gold, red, and brown leaves. The wind carried the scent of wet wood through the narrow, quiet streets of the neighborhood, where Alicia now led the Raíces Community Clinic. It was a simple space, white walls, smooth concrete floor, repurposed furniture, but every detail breathed purpose. Children played in the courtyard, elders were treated with care, and youths learned to care for each other. Alicia was at the heart of it all. Wearing her lab coat open, red hair in a tight bun, her eyes attentive to both details and people's hearts. That morning, she was leaving the treatment room when she felt a different chill. It wasn't cold, it was memory. She paused in the doorway, her gaze fixed on the front gate. Outside, a tall man in a black suit stood under the gentle sunlight. No car, no security, just him, hands visible, carrying nothing except time. Alicia's heart sped up, the same heart she had learned to quiet with silence and distance, but now it beat as if recognizing the exact moment their story would breathe again. Ezequiel was there, his hair longer, his face showing faint marks of someone who'd stopped fighting pain and started listening to it. He said nothing, didn't try to step inside. He simply raised his hand, slowly, just as he had that cold night in Seattle when everything began. She didn't move right away, but inside something aligned, as if all the silences, wounds, and days of absence had taught something essential. Sometimes love doesn't return with promises. It returns with presence. And in that gentle, silent gesture, there was everything she needed to know. Alicia walked to the gate and opened it without hurry. She stopped in front of him, didn't say a word. She just extended her hand and touched his. Their fingers met with gentle firmness. No rush, no fear. Their eyes met. There was emotion. There was history. But above all, there was choice. She smiled. A small, serene smile, the kind that carries the weight of what has been overcome and the lightness of what is to come. Ezequiel returned the smile, but didn't try to speak. There was no need. There where it all began, the cold, the silence, the outstretched gesture, it began anew. But this time, there was no chasm between them. There was a bridge. It wasn't just any restart, it was a restart built on equality. On truth, on love. Months after that silent reunion at the clinic, Tacoma's landscape began to change. Flowers reappeared in modest window boxes. Warm bread scent drifted through mornings, and afternoons were filled with new voices. Voices seeking help, shelter, or simply someone who truly listened. At the center of it all grew Casa Esperanza, Where once lay an abandoned lot marked by stigma, now stood a simple structure painted white and blue, with hand-lettered signs made by volunteers. The name was Alicia's idea. The project, a silent promise kept by Ezequiel. She was now the NGO director, walking its halls with gentle authority, blending firmness and kindness like someone who's hit rock bottom knows how to do. Ezequiel, for his part, had exchanged his suit for cotton shirts and light trousers. He was seen carrying boxes, organizing files, washing utensils. He refused any official position. He was just a volunteer. "Are you sure you want to take charge of intake today?" she asked one morning, watching him balancing 2 boxes of forms. "As long as I don't have to deal with crying children," he replied with a half-smile. "Then best stick with the elderly. They only complain quietly, but for longer." They laughed. It was different now, lighter, more stable. The wounds still existed, but they'd healed. And around them, a web of lives being touched and transformed bloomed with each new service. Casa Esperanza offered free nursing care, preventive guidance, mental health talks, and basic courses for vulnerable communities. Nothing there was about charity. It was about dignity, about giving people what they always deserved, but never received. One day, during the reopening of the children's wing, a local reporter asked Ezequiel why, with all his money and power, he chose to be there, outside the structure carrying boxes and cleaning windows. He answered simply, "For a long time, I had everything, but it was empty. Now I have purpose, and that gives me peace." Alicia watched from a distance, leaning against the clinic's nursing room door. She smiled, not the guarded smile from the beginning, but a new one, whole, because now she knew he hadn't changed for her. He'd changed for himself, for everything they'd been through, and for everything they wanted to build together. That night, sitting on the sidewalk in front of the NGO, she rested her head on his shoulder. The sky was clear. City lights shimmered on the asphalt, wet from the last rain. "Do you still miss silence?" she asked. "Sometimes," he replied. "But tonight, I'd rather hear your breathing." She smiled and closed her eyes. There, in that simple, profound moment, everything made sense. It wasn't about happy endings. It was about true new beginnings. Because sometimes it's in the cold of the night and in being seen unmasked that you find the kind of love you can't buy, measure, or explain. You just live it. So, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which part moved you the most. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, share with someone who needs to hear this today, and of course subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. Before you go, I've got another emotional story, even more intense, that will touch your heart deeply. It starts simply, but has a twist nobody expects. See you there.